Hey guys, welcome back to First and 10 over here on Clueless Gamers. I'm your host, Pete, joined as always in a sec by my co-host, Brian. Welcome, guys. We've made it to the playoffs. They officially start today because we're shockingly recording this on a Saturday. It is super wild card weekend for the 2024-25 NFL season. I cannot wait. There's not a lot of games that we're going to get to, just one in Week 18, just because a lot of teams were either terrible or playing backups. Really didn't matter many of the games. But there is one game in particular we are going to cover, which is Lions-Vikings, one of the biggest games of the year. We're going to get into some head coaching news that ended up happening, some coaching news around the league. And then, of course, we will give our playoff picks. And, Brian, with all that being said, I welcome you in, man. How are you doing today? And are you excited, man? Playoff time, baby.
Oh, absolutely. This is the time of the year for football fans. You got a three-pack on Sunday, and then closing it out, of course, with your favorite team, who we will see on Monday night in a different location, of course, with the situation going on in California. So, a lot to cover. As always, a happy Saturday. I think this is the first time that we've recorded on an afternoon,
Yeah,
so it's like
afternoon, man.
daylight, which is different. But looking forward to diving in on all the action.
Yeah, I definitely think this is our first Saturday afternoon. We've done Saturday night, but not Saturday afternoon. So we're here to get into that. And Brian, let us start off here. Last week of the season, week 18, last game of the year, game 272 in the NFL. The Vikings visit Detroit, number one seed, NFC North title on the line, one of the biggest games of the year build. And the Lions pretty much dominate 31-9. They win the number one seed. They win the NFC North. The Vikings, really, especially offensively, did not show up in this game. Was it a little bit of Darnold and the offense getting a little tight? Maybe they choked a little bit, or was it something else? We know we've talked at length. Everybody's talked at length on every other possible network you watch about the Lions' defensive issues. They get Anzalone back in this game. Aaron Glenn, still even with all the injuries, I thought had a masterful game plan in this one to control that Vikings offense. 2 times down, 4th and goal in the red zone, come away with 0 points. What a great job there. And then that offense, really, especially in the second half, behind Jahmyr Gibbs, who has just fell in perfectly into this sole starting role. He's not sharing carries with the Montgomery injury. We'll see if he comes back for the playoffs. There's some reports that he might be back for the divisional round, but he has looked fantastic. A Pro Bowler, 4 touchdowns in this game. Brian, I'll ask you, did you take more away from this game? Hey, this is the Lions. A lot of people were selling their stock on them. They deserve respect. They've been one of the best teams in the league all year long. Or was this the Vikings and Sam Darnold choking in the biggest game of the year?
I think there's an element of both, but I give more of the credit to the Lions, I think, because, I mean, I think we expected going into this game there'd be some drama. I think we thought it would be high scoring, close, entertaining. Unfortunately, it didn't really live up to the billing in that regard because the Lions defense, they got some guys back, like you mentioned, Anzalone, which is a big deal. It's still a very beat up
Oh, yeah.
defense. And boy, did they put their best foot forward in this game and have a great game plan against a big time offense that had been playing great. You know, all the weapons they have on the Vikings side, and they silenced them. I mean, so it was really an impressive performance by Detroit. I feel like they kind of re-stamped themselves as the Super Bowl favorite
Yeah.
with that kind of performance because suddenly, later in the season, questions were arising. Could this team, win the whole thing with how beat up their
Mm-hmm.
defense was? Well, if they can deliver that kind of a performance against a division rival in a game that means that much, I feel like they're kind of back on track where they should be considered the favorite, that their defense isn't as much of a liability as we think, that Jahmyr Gibbs can handle being the sole running back, which I wondered if he could
Yeah.
because it was always the two-man show there with Montgomery. Gibbs is just outstanding at the 4 touchdowns. Goff, of course, doing what he did. The Lions defense, I mean, Darnold had a very off game. A lot of his passes were just
Yeah.
off the mark, high and wide of his targets. But hey, I mean, in a game that we thought would be close, the Lions delivered, and I really think That kind of performance showed me a lot about them, that they are sort of back. And if there were any questions of just how good are they, I think they answered them in this game.
I agree with you. I think this should be more about the Lions, but for the sake of just playing the other side of the coin, the Vikings also choked in this game. I mean, their defense did not play well, and that offense, you have to remember, in this game, Jared Goff, if you watch this whole game, he was not good. I mean, like, did he make moments? Sure. But he throws 2 picks. They had multiple turnovers on downs. They were the Lions through and through, going for it on 4th down. And I feel like that affected the Vikings, where they constantly kept going for it on 4th down when they could have came away, especially early in the game in the second quarter. Come away with 3 points. Yeah, you're on the 2, you're on the 3-yard line. It stinks you couldn't punch it in. Just kick the field goal. It's not like this Lions offense has it right now. And they were the ones that choked. They played into the Lions' hand. They tried to be the Lions. They're not the Lions. And I think that was a huge mistake on the part of Minnesota. Goff was off in this game. Darnold was off in this game. And it was just about what team, another player outside the quarterback, was going to make the necessary plays. And as we talk, Jahmyr Gibbs absolutely stepped up in this game. He was incredible. He took over that Lions offense and did what he needed to do. But Brian, you run through the sequence here. I mean, the game is told first quarter, right? There's a bunch of punts and there's a touchdown by Gibbs. To me, the game is told in the second quarter. The Lions punt the ball. The Lions punt the ball. Then the Vikings have the ball on the 3-yard line, turn it over on downs. They come back and Goff throws a pick. So now, again, you get the ball right in your lap. The Vikings only come away with a field goal on 4 plays. The Lions come back down the field, turnover on downs again. They go for it. Okay, what do the Vikings get out of that? Just a field goal. And then at the end of the half, the Lions get a field goal. Like right there, you have the ball on the 3-yard line. You get an interception, come away with a field goal. The Lions go for it on 4th down. You come away with another field goal. There's your game. Your game's right there. And even though you could say, oh, Pete, at the end of the first half, the score was still close. It was 10-6. You could feel the momentum already had been sucked out of the Minnesota sideline. They had multiple opportunities. You could see Justin Jefferson getting aggravated. He's wide open on one play. Sandora overthrows him. Happens on another play. Another play that maybe Jefferson should have caught off his hands. You could tell the frustration was mounting for Minnesota. And for me, even though the score's close at halftime, you can tell the Lions had control of that football game.
And I think one of the key points that you made there is that the Vikings tried to be the Lions with the going for it on 4th down. And look, we've criticized the Lions at times for being too aggressive. The Vikings, I mean, they took it to another level here. You let the Lions do what they're going to do, but you got to, if you're Kevin O'Connell, you got to coach the way you've coached, and he hasn't been like that this year, the bold going for it on 4th down when you're easily in field goal range. So they cost their team points multiple occasions, as you laid out there, and in a game of that magnitude, it did prove to be costly. I can't remember what quarter it was. I guess maybe it was the third, where the Lions actually got one of their touchdowns. It was a Goff passing touchdown to Gibbs, where they went for it on a 4th down. Third quarter, and I thought that was like the play where when they hit that, it was like, okay, game over now. It was trending in that direction in the second quarter, but that was sort of like the knockout punch where the Lions really forced their will, going for it on the 4th down, scoring a touchdown, and from there, the Vikings didn't have anything left.
I mean, if you want to make that argument that the third quarter changed the whole game, that's 100% fair. Let's look at the sequence of plays that happened in the third quarter. The Vikings come out with the football in the beginning of the second half, drive right down the field, 4th and goal at the 2-yard line. Not only don't take the field goal in a 10-6 game, but go for it, don't get it. Goff comes back in one play, throws another pick. So now you got the ball once again, and what do the Vikings come away with? A field goal. Like, right there, you're not doing it. That Gibbs touchdown on 4th down comes away, and then a missed field goal to end the third quarter for the Vikings. So if you want to make the argument that in the third quarter the game was over there, 100% true as well. I think the second or the third quarter you can make that agreement. They did not cash in. You look at the final score of this game, if you're just looking at the stats, you're just looking at the score, you don't watch the game, you go, well, the Lions, they ran away with this game. No, it was really in the fourth quarter where the Vikings' energy had been sapped out between the second and third quarter. It was done. In the fourth quarter, the Lions took over. They did what they did. They rolled. You add another 2 Gibbs touchdowns, and the game was well out of hand at that point. This was just poor execution on the part of the Vikings, Sam Darnold, for all the praise that we've given him, for all the praise that many people have given him this season, we talked last week that the Vikings deserve our respect. They come into this game and Sam Darnold, he looked tight. That's the bottom line. The Lions control possession in this game. I think it was something like 36 minutes to 23 minutes, give or take some seconds in there. And when the Vikings had the ball, they looked tight on a lot of short fields. I'm just worried about them, a 14-win team, a 5 seed going into the playoffs. I know it's one game and it's not fair and maybe he shakes it off, but I do have concerns going into the playoffs after seeing that performance.
Yeah, well, it's not a good way to go into the playoffs, and they're facing a team that, as you know too well, the Rams had the upper hand in the regular season meetings. So we'll see what happens. Now it's going to be on a neutral field, but it really takes a lot of the good mojo that you had at the season. You're 14-3. But, in the end, going out with a loss like that is not a good way to go into the playoffs. And I mean, we'll see if they're able to recover. They're a slight favorite in the game, but I don't know that anybody thinks this is like a slam dunk Vikings pick in this one coming up.
Yeah, we will certainly get to that, but I just want to give hats off to the Lions, 15-2, best record by far in their franchise's history. They have never had the number 1 seed. They got that. So they deserve all the credit for everything that they had a reason to lay down this offseason. I mean, this season with all of the injuries that they've had, with pretty tough competition they've also played. A lot of playoff teams. They deserve all the credit in my world. Hats off to them for sure. Brian, a lot of coaching news. That was really all there was talk about in Week 18. A lot of backup games, a lot of bad teams playing. There was some playoff positioning that went on, sure, but not much. That was really the only one of consequence. Really some draft order stuff that went on. The Patriots winning against the Bills, losing the number 1 pick. Probably a bad decision. But let's go to that, Brian. Few coaching firings have happened Monday and Tuesday. Some GMs, some coordinators. I wanted to get your take on what you thought was the biggest shock. Maybe there wasn't one for you, but what was the biggest shock head coaching firing that happened in the NFL? Was there one for you, and which one was it?
For me, it would be Gerard Mayo, because we had talked about last week. I came right on here and said that I would be surprised, and I didn't think the Patriots would fire Gerard Mayo after just one season at the helm. But sure enough, after the final game of the season, word came out, he's out. After one season, of course, everybody has now pegged Mike Vrabel as the next coach of the Patriots, which is certainly a good possibility. I just don't like it from the standpoint that this was the guy who was handpicked by Robert Kraft, right, to be the successor to Bill Belichick. Right. And to after 1 year where you didn't have a lot to work with, I mean, you did come out of this year and you feel like you have your quarterback for the future, yes, but outside of that, this team is not very talented. I mean, they are bottom 3, bottom 2 as far as talent on the roster.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody expected this was going to be a winning operation. And hey, maybe he was in over his head, but you got to give him some time to learn the job. I mean, to just fire coaches after 1 year is just not good practice for me in the NFL. I mean, this was a franchise that had one coach for over 20 years. I know he was a legendary coach, but to go the other extreme, knock a guy out after one season, I'm not saying that he did a good job. I'm just saying that he needs more time to prove himself. And so that to me still came as a surprise, and I just don't think it's good organizational management.
Yeah, the only thing for me that I guess I would have been normally surprised, but I wasn't, just because the reports in the last month of the season very much seem like, hey, they're going to probably let this guy go at the end of the season regardless. And I think regardless if it's unfair, they clearly, before that final game of the season, they knew he was done. Whether they won or they lost, they knew he was done, because right after the game, they posted that giant thing saying thank you and the explanation for it. You don't make that in 5-10 minutes after the game. There's no way. So that was already pre-done. I think just the final salt in the wound was, of course, the Patriots. They win a meaningless game and lose the number 1 draft pick. I think that was just kind of the icing on the cake. For me, the reason why he gets fired, is it a little reactionary? Sure. I think it's 2 reasons. One, Vrabel was on the market. I think that is a huge factor
Mhm.
in why he was fired. I think the second one was he had a lot of mismanagement in terms of press conferences. I think PR wise and the way he seemed to control the locker room, you could pull up the reports, you could pull up all the stories throughout the season. A lot of stuff where he says one thing, immediately goes back on it in the next press conference. He says this questionable thing about a player or calling out his team, calling them soft, immediately goes back on things. Like, I think that constant flip flopping throughout the season maybe showed the Crafts, maybe showed the Patriots organization, like, maybe this guy's a little in over his head. Maybe he doesn't have it. And some guys are just not head coaches. Some guys are coordinators. Some guys are great former players that are just not built for coaching. Like, that does happen. We'll have to see what ends up happening with Jerod Mayo. But I just always question that it was such a step up for him, kind of, not really controlling the defense because it was really Bill, it was really Patricia, it was all these guys. He was kind of this, linebackers coach slash, kind of defensive specialist coach in there, assisting head coach. I don't know if he had really the moxie for it, and it ends up kind of coming to an end in one season. Other firings that ended up happening that weren't shocking at all. Antonio Pierce gets fired.
Yeah.
I was actually more shocked that it took a whole day to get him fired because I believe he ended up being fired on like later Monday
Yeah.
or Tuesday. That I was shocked. Clear that he was going to let go, and then it was like, all right, they're going to keep GM Tom Telesco, and he gets fired like a day later. So that was a really weird situation that happened there. But that's the Raiders, and then really the only head coaching fire that wasn't shocking was Doug Peterson, right? Like we kind of the
Yeah.
Jags have been the
Absolutely.
Jags. I don't know how great ownership is down there. Everyone seems like their coaching career goes to die in Jacksonville, but it had kind of run its course. I mean, there's no question he was a better head coach than Urban Meyer by a mile, but it wasn't working. For whatever reason, it wasn't working down there. They needed a change of leadership. They need to get Lawrence back on track, especially after the huge contract, whether you agree or disagree, and I kind of disagreed. I think you did as well, that they gave him in the offseason. You need to bring somebody else in there. I understand that one. The other openings across the league, of course, the Jets that already had a firing, the Saints that already had a firing, the Bears that already had a firing. So those are kind of your head coaching kind of circuit that is going to go on around the league. The Titans fired one of their GMs. A little known name that it kind of goes under the radar because what does it matter? But wide receivers coach Wes Welker for the Dolphins also let go after the season as well. A lot of people forget Wes Welker was on that coaching staff. Him and the special teams coordinator were given the boot. Did that have anything to do with how the Tyreek situation kind of went at the end of the season? Where in that Jets game, the audio came out a couple days after the game in the third quarter. He literally quit on the team, straight up quit. And the last quarter and a half of that game did not play. There's a lot of discussions that we could talk about across the league. The 49ers letting go of their defensive coordinator. Does that open the door to Robert Saleh rejoining the staff? Wouldn't be shocked if he rejoined the staff down there in San Francisco. Any other things across the league, Bri, that you're keeping your eye on in the head coaching firings and hirings across the league?
I think another thing that was notable, and by the way, you enlightened me on the Dolphins coaching changes because I didn't even see that about Welker and that. But the other thing that I think is interesting to bring up is what the Giants did in keeping Brian
Yes.
Daboll and Joe Shane, opting to stay the course and not make any changes, which can be seen as a controversial decision amongst fans, and I certainly understand frustration, people wanting change there. But my feeling is, and has always been, stability is what you want in a franchise. And I just feel like the way to go here was not to make the change. I'm not saying Dable has done a good job because he obviously hasn't. This was a horrendous season for the Giants. I think they're worst in franchise history. But you try to get the quarterback situation straightened out. You go to work this offseason, see if you can get it turned around. I just feel like if you made a change again, you just continue in this cycle where you never get it right. At least with Dable, you've already had a year where he was coach of the year, where he made the playoffs. He's shown his ability as a head coach. If you can, make the right moves with the roster, which is obviously a long way from happening. But I do think in the long run, the Giants will be better off by staying the course here. Curious to see you feel about that?
Yeah, I think stability is the way to go. I disagree with you that I think they should have been fired. I think they both should have been let go. I was talking about this last night with some avid Giants fans. I just think the situation they set up is obviously doomed to fail. We know exactly what is going to happen. You kept a coach, and if you listen to Mara's press conference there and kind of the report he put out, kind of maybe to appease fans, kind of maybe the way that he feels himself. He basically phrased it as, these guys are on thin ice. That is no way to
Yeah.
go into another season. It is very obvious what's going to happen. The Giants, at the moment, which is insane to think about, have the hardest schedule in football going into next season. Seemingly, we don't know how these teams are going to play out, but the teams that they are playing is a gauntlet. So that sucks. We know this team is winning 4 games or less next year. We know it. Let's be real. We know exactly what is going to happen. And halfway through the season, both definitely Dayball are going to be let go. They're going to be on an interim situation because they're probably going to bring in some veteran QB. Maybe they reach for a rookie quarterback in the first round, and they are going to be doomed to fail because these guys are going to make decisions to save their job, not as what in the best interest of playing this to pick the best guy for the franchise. Pick the best player on the board. They are absolutely not going to do it. They are going to reach for a quarterback. We know what is going to happen, or overpay for guys in free agency, and this is going to be a disaster that will end in both of these guys getting fired in mid-season. And I just think, let's say they bring in a young quarterback. You're going to have a quarterback who halfway through the season has a new coaching staff and a new head coach. In the second year, he's going to be on to a brand new coach with a brand new coordinator immediately. We know throughout history, typically, that is a recipe to ruin a QB's career and to be a disaster. That is exactly what the Giants are setting up. I think it's very hard to fire one head coach and keep the GM. That's usually never a good idea.
Yeah.
But if you were going to ever fire someone, Shane should have been fired. I think that Hard Knocks, the way it is played out, it's very clear. He seems very, in my opinion, in over his head. He doesn't. I know he's made some picks here. There's neighbors, maybe Tyrone Tracy, Andrew Thomas. Sure. At the end of the day, the quarterback and some of these other moves, he is not getting right. The decision with Barkley, the decision with Daniel Jones, to me, all of those mixed in are just not good enough to keep him as the GM of the New York Giants. And then Daboll, outside of one kind of fake phantom season of success in the first year, has been downright terrible. The way that this has been handled, all of the stuff with Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator last season. I think you've seen 3 seasons. It's not like this is a one-season thing. You've seen 3 seasons. The Giants are not good enough. Let's rip it down and start over. And I think it's ultimately a poor decision that they made as a franchise, which seems to be the case for both of our local franchises here in the Jets and Giants. Organizationally, from the top down, they just can't get it right.
Absolutely. Yeah, you couldn't have a worse situation between the two teams right now. But for the Giants, the decision that really sticks with them is the Barkley one because it worked as a double-edged sword where not only did they lose him, but he goes to the division rival. And it's not like, oh, he went to a division rival and put up, a mediocre season. No, he had a chance to break the all-time rushing
Yeah.
record. So, I mean, that really works against them. The fact that they're watching him do that with the division rival in Philadelphia, who has a chance to win the Super Bowl. Oh, by the way,
It's tough.
there's so many things that have gone wrong. Uh, yeah, I mean, look, I don't have a good answer. I mean, do I feel good about Dable and Shane coming back? No, I just feel like making a change just continues the cycle where they're never going to get it right. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think anybody has a good answer when it comes to the Giants or the Jets for that matter. The offseason is what will tell the story.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough year next year for both of those franchises once again. I'm just telling you right now, doing early predictions for the 2025 season, you're both going to be really awful. That's just going to be the case. Other news before we get to picks, just we don't have to talk about it, just around the league. The Colts announced that Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard were coming back. Kind of shocked that Chris Ballard ended up coming back because there was a lot of reports that seemed like he was going to get fired. Both of them retain their job. Trent Baalke is somehow staying in Jacksonville. I have no idea why you fire Doug Peterson, bring in and keep Trent Baalke. I have no idea, even back to his San Francisco days, how this guy keeps getting jobs and keeps retaining jobs, because I don't think he's done a good job of drafting in free agency in Jacksonville. Have no idea how he kept that job. Really poor decision there. Maybe he has something over the cons in Jacksonville that he was able to keep that job. And interesting, at the end of the season, I guess the way it ended, all the Tyreek stuff, the Dolphins felt the need to come out and say that Mike McDaniels and GM Chris Greer also keeping their job. In my mind, I guess I didn't think they were really threatened to be fired. I thought that was telling that the Dolphins came out and made a point to say both of these guys are keeping their jobs. Definitely something to keep an eye on going into next season for the Dolphins, because for me, that kind of heats up their seats both going into the final season, possible final season and next season that they could have as well. Any quick thoughts that you had on that? Because I thought that was very interesting that the Dolphins came out and did that.
Well, another thing on the Dolphins that was notable was Tyreek Hill's comments after the season ended in the final game, and he basically tells
Yeah.
reporters, "I'm out, bro."
Yeah.
Well, wait a second. How are you out? You're under
Yeah.
contract. I mean, there's no transfer portal in the NFL, so I mean, I guess he can ask to be traded, but I don't know. It was kind of a weird year for Tyreek Hill, starting with the off the field incident. Was that week 1 of the
Yeah.
season, I think,
Yeah.
and then I mean, he what was by far not his productive self this year. I mean,
Yeah.
battled some injuries. Of course, Tua was out for decent part of the season, but I just thought like those kind of comments, like you're showing you're not a team guy whatsoever. I mean, if I were a Dolphin fan, I'd be like, I don't want this guy around.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think between that and the handling that Mike McDaniel has done all season, I thought it was interesting that they felt that they had to come out and say this. But I'm not going to be shocked if he gets fired next year, McDaniels. I think he's kind of lost control of that locker room. I think Hill is done. I think he's getting traded. Now, I don't think he's going back to the Chiefs, even though he clearly wants to. He clearly misses them. Remember when he got traded over to Miami, and not only he was happy with the money and everything, but he was saying Tua was the most accurate quarterback in the league and how happy he was to be there?
Yeah.
What a joke that is. So we know he's gone. Jalen Ramsey also had a cryptic kind of Instagram thing as well, where it seemed like, is he on the way out of Miami? That whole thing is falling apart there. But yeah, we're going to see Hill traded. We'll talk about in the offseason where he ends up going. And I honestly, I hope that the Dolphins get the best possible thing for him, and he gets traded somewhere he absolutely doesn't want to go, because you quit on your team the way he has handled it since,
Yeah.
especially that he has left Kansas City. I don't really have any kind of like, oh, I hope I see him on this excellent team. I really honestly don't care about what he's doing. You don't quit on your team. You don't do that stuff. That's childish. It's unprofessional. And then to come out and have a press conference like that, it's disgraceful, and that's not how a professional should handle anything at all. But we'll have all season. We'll do some off-season content to talk about, scheduled interviews, who gets hired, all of that stuff. But you know what? We're here to talk about the Super Wild Card weekend here. Brian, let's get to some picks, including the game kicking off here in about an hour and a half. 4:30 Saturday game. Always seems to be the game that the Houston Texans play in. They host the Los Angeles Chargers coming in here. The Chargers favored in this game going into Houston. Houston's the home team, and I think it's about a 2.5-point spread that the Chargers have gotten this game up to. Who you got in the opening game of the playoffs?
Yeah, this has become tradition that every time the Texans make the playoffs, they are in this opening slot on Saturday. I feel like when you think back years, you always remember like the matchups against Andy Dalton's Bengals, because it happened like two or
I
three
know.
times. But here they are against the Chargers. I mean, my first thought is I just don't believe in this Texan team
Yeah.
whatsoever. I mean, I know they won the division, but if we're honest, it was a very weak division. I mean, you had
It was.
Jacksonville, Tennessee were
Yeah.
both doormats, and you had the very disappointing Colts and how their season ended, especially with that game against the Giants. So I just don't have a good feeling about this Houston team. I know they're at home. I know they won the division, but all season long their offense has been like great. Stroud clearly took a step back. They didn't protect him well. They had injuries they dealt with. So with all that said, Chargers, I feel like are going to out physical them. With that running game, I just think way the Chargers play works well in the playoffs. The Harbaugh way, he's clearly put his stamp on this team. They haven't been perfect this year, but I think they've been better than expected in year one under Harbaugh. I think they're going to run the ball well, kind of grind it out. I see something like 23-14, a weird kind of score like that. But I'm taking the Chargers on the road to get this wild card weekend started with a road victory.
Yeah, with the Chargers being the favorite, I think some people have kind of done the opposite. They don't want to just pick the favorite, so they've pushed back and they're like, we can't sleep on this Houston team, this pass rush, blah, 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 blah. Sure, anything can happen. I think this game is going to be about a field goal game. It's going to be close. But I'm taking the Chargers in this one. I think let's not outthink ourselves. They are playing better than the Texans have been. The Texans have been terrible in the last, especially month of the season. They have it going. The Chargers are going to make that necessary plays, and everyone's like, they'll put Derek Stingley on Lad McConkey maybe, and they'll take him out. Everybody's sleeping on Johnson. Like, the guy just had 170 yards, I think, against New England not long ago, a couple weeks ago. He deserves some respect. I think this game is going to get muddy. It's going to get physical. It's going to be downright dirty, which is exactly what Harbaugh wants it to be. And I think the Chargers are just a more focused, the vibes, the team, the energy, all of the injuries, of course, that the Texans have suffered. I don't think that helps them whatsoever. They deserve props. It's a weak division. They won 10 games, first quarterback coaching duo in their first 2 years to make the playoffs and be division winner. That deserves a lot of props for C.J. Stroud and DeMeco Ryans. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of a lost season playoff success-wise. Stroud got his win last year. This is a huge game for Justin Herbert. Looking for his first ever playoff win. You do not want to go out in a wild card round here yet again with the coach that everyone's believing in, because now you can't really blame the coach, the defense, anybody else. This will really be solely on Justin Herbert if he loses this game. Give me the Chargers in this one. I'm not out thinking it. Probably the 8 o'clock game on Saturday here is the Steelers and the Ravens, another AFC North classic matchup going. I think the last time I saw this line, it's Ravens about 9.5. It's a pretty huge spread for what these games typically are. Remember, Pro Bowl wide receiver Zay Flowers not playing in this game. So that is a factor for the Baltimore Ravens. That being said, I'm not outthinking this one either. I'm taking the Ravens. I know there's a lot of hoopla, always rightfully so, about Lamar Jackson. He's 2-4 in the playoffs. His numbers come way down. I get all that. This Steelers team, let's just not outthink the room. This Steelers team has fallen apart. They've lost 4 in a row. They have no mojo, vibes, skill, anything going on offense. There's just nothing going on. They've been downright horrible. This defense has come back to earth. This has been classic Steelers. They start the season, they're above 500. They're maybe this great team that's going to be at the top of the seeds. They're 10-3, and they fizzle out at the end of the season. Their schedule got way harder, and they collapse. And I think they're going to be another one and done in the playoffs. Have not won a playoff game since 2016, the Steelers have. I'm not outthinking the room. Maybe the game is a little bit closer than 9.5. If I'm taking the points, I probably take the Steelers because I think this game is going to be a lot closer. But outright winner, give me the Ravens.
I mean, I think conventional wisdom is that the Ravens are just going to wipe the floor in this game, that they're the clearly superior team. They got the 2-time MVP quarterback who, yes, has a lot to prove still in his playoff performances, but the Ravens on paper, head and shoulders, are above the Steelers. I'm taking the Ravens to win. I agree with you on all those points, but there's just something about these rivalry games. There's something about this matchup in particular. The Steelers beat them in Pittsburgh earlier in the year, and I know the game in Baltimore went the Ravens' way. They beat them handily, but I see this game being pretty close. I think it's within a touchdown. I'm with you that I take the Steelers with the points. Now, it would be an outright disaster if the Ravens lost this game outright. I mean, absolutely. Like you said, the Steelers are clearly limping their way into the playoffs, having lost their last 4, not particularly competitive in any of them, a couple of the games coming at home. So there's really nothing that you liked from them down the stretch. It's the playoffs. Russell Wilson, I know it's been a little while since he's been in the playoffs, and his skills were a little sharper back then with Seattle, but I feel like he's might still have a moment in him. I feel like the Steelers are going to play a competitive game in this rivalry matchup. I do think not having Zay Flowers is a big deal for
Yep.
the Ravens offense. They're not exactly rich in the wide receiver position. I mean, Rashad Bateman, you're looking at as like the next guy up. So I'm looking at the tight ends to really be targeted a lot, Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Of course, you hope that Derrick Henry puts up one of his big games.
Yeah.
If he does, I think the Ravens are pretty close to unstoppable. But all things considered, I think the Steelers will be in the game. I think it'll be within a touchdown. I don't think it will be a blowout, but my pick is
I
Baltimore.
mean, we will be talking heavily next week if the Ravens somehow choke this game away. We're going to be talking about that. The Sunday games, there's a 3-spot slate here, Brian. The first game kicks off at 1 o'clock. The 7-seed Broncos going up to Buffalo. Buffalo's favored, I think it's about 8.5, give or take on most sites, is what you're going to see. I'm taking the Buffalo Bills. Again, 3 in a row here, I'm going to say this term. I'm not going to outthink the room because I've seen some people stirring. Oh, the Broncos. Maybe they're going to go into Buffalo with an upset. Let's stop. The Broncos beat one semi-caliber good team this season, and that was the Los Angeles Chargers, and they split that series. Let's stop it. There are rookie quarterbacks on the road. Only 3 in history have won. I believe it's Flacco, Sanchez, and Russell Wilson. I believe that was the 3 on the road in the rookie season that have won a game. It just doesn't historically, statistically happen. I easily see Buffalo covering this. This is going to be a 10 to 14 point game. Give me the Bills.
I'm with you here. I know there's this sentiment out there that the Bills could struggle and the Broncos, have had their moments this year in Bo Nix and company, but rookie quarterback, like you said, in their first game. You think of some of the greats, how they fared in their first game in the playoffs, and it wasn't good. So, Bo Nix, he might be a pretty good quarterback. I don't think anybody thinks he's an elite player by any stretch. So, I think he's going to get a bit exposed here in his first matchup going into that hostile environment. I mean, that is really a tough
It's a
place to
tough
play.
ask.
They're going to be jacked up. They think their team is going to win the
Oh, yeah.
Super Bowl this year. And so that place is going to be jazzed up. And the Bills been rock solid all year long. I mean, there really haven't been many holes. So I agree. I think they win and cover the number to open up Sunday.
The 4:30 game kicks off with the 7-seed Packers going to Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts cleared concussion protocol. He's playing. He hasn't played in over 20 days, so that is a factor. Jordan Love kind of dealing with like a hand wrist situation there, but he is going to play. No Christian Watson in this game. To me, I'm picking the Eagles here. I understand Hurts is going to be rusty, but this is still one of the best offensive line, if not the best offensive line, right up there with Detroit in football. Even if he's not sharp, they're going to run the ball despite what, A.J. Brown might be complaining about. They're going to run the ball with Barkley. This defense is excellent for Philadelphia. They're in Philadelphia. That place is, they're rabid. What's going to be going on there. And I don't think this is a situation where the Packers last year, they visit the 2-seed Cowboys. We know the Cowboys are historic playoff chokers, right? Dak is an historic playoff choker. And that Packers team, too, didn't have the expectations that they had coming into this year. And they also weren't as banged up in that game as they are coming into this one. The Packers really haven't beat a good team all season long. I think the Eagles handle this. I think it's about a 4.5 point spread in most things that I have saw. I'm taking Philly in the points. Give me the Eagles.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of concerns about the Packers, and you go in, your quarterback is banged up, especially when it's like an elbow issue that directly affects every time he drops back. That's concerning. Not having the one deep threat at wide receiver with Christian Watson, that's an issue. And like you said, the Packers, at times they've looked really good this year, but they've needed to stand up against the better teams. They've completely fallen flat. So I kind of lost my belief in that team down the stretch of the season. While Philly, we know it is just a loaded team, both sides of the ball. They really got their defense straightened out as this season's gone on. You got the all-world performing running back with Barkley. Hurts coming back and his bevy of weapons. I think it's too much Eagles here. Too much is working against Green Bay. Philly at home. I think they win. I wouldn't be surprised if this one got out of hand.
The 8 o'clock game is the Commanders visiting the Bucks. And Brian, when the schedule came out for this, when they put all the teams in order, I was actually shocked by this because I know every playoff game matters, right? But it feels like the Sunday night game in this wild card window is usually the premier matchup that takes place. So I was very fascinated that it was Commanders Bucks. It's very interesting choice selection here. I'm still excited for each and every one of these games. In this one, Jaden Daniels, great season, probably going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. He was a Pro Bowler. We know what he's done. Going against Baker Mayfield, I believe making his fifth, playoff start, has excellent playoff stats in his career. I'm taking the Bucks in this one. I know, to me, this game and the game that we're going to pick here in Vikings-Rams here are the two coin flip games of the wild card weekend. I could see both of those games going either way. But I'm going to take the Bucks in the points. It's about a 3.5-point spread the last time I saw. It matters. A rookie QB, as I said, on the road. You're in Tampa. I know that pass defense isn't great, but you know what is great in Tampa? That run defense. And I think right now, you look at what Jaden Daniels does. You want to get him on the ground moving. You want to get Brian Robinson on the ground moving. And I think against Vita Vea and that front, they are not going to be able to do that. I don't think they are good enough yet to really exploit that back end of Tampa Bay. And color me crazy. Color me shocked here, Brian. I'm taking experience here in this moment. Baker has been excellent in the playoffs. I think he pulls this team to a victory. Give me Tampa and the points. I'm taking them.
Yeah, well, you might be surprised here because I've been high on Washington all season. I picked them to make the playoffs, which was
Great call.
admittedly an outlandish pick, and they ended up proving me right with just a terrific season. Clearly have their quarterback the future. I mean, he's an absolute star, but I feel like, they're kind of ahead of schedule here, where to
They
now
are.
ask them to go on the road and win a playoff game and go on a run in the playoffs, I just think is asking a little too much. And the Bucks, I feel like we kind of know what they are. Their offense got back on track once Mike Evans got back in the lineup. He ended up eclipsing 1,000 yards, even though it took
I know.
the
I was
last
so
play of the
happy
game
for him.
basically to get it. 11 straight seasons, obviously a remarkably consistent career that he's had. But yeah, and you said it. I mean, Baker, another terrific season. I just think with Washington, we're going to see Jaden Daniels look a little bit rattled. The playoffs is a different animal. It's nothing like the regular season. They're on the road for this game, so I'm kind of going the same way as I am with Denver, reasoning that the rookie quarterback isn't going to be up to his usual standard of play, and so I'm taking the Bucks. So I think this is going to be a close game,
Yeah.
very good
Oh, yeah.
game all the way through. But I think the Bucks edge them out in the end. So
And the
I'm with
fun
you.
matchup to watch, Brian. Remember, Marshawn Lattimore plays for the Commanders, fully healthy. Him and Mike Evans hate each other. So that is going to be really fun to watch all game. I'm super excited for that matchup. And Brian, the final game of the wild card weekend, Monday night, 8 o'clock, the Vikings visit the Rams. Unfortunately, our hearts go out to all the people that have been affected or lost in the fires surrounding Los Angeles. It has been horrific. The scenes and videos have been absolutely terrible. I think it goes without saying, but I will say it anyway. Our hearts go out to them. Terrible situation. I hope everyone stays safe. And with that, I knew early in the week, even when that was going on, when a lot of media members or even Rams fans I saw thought there's no chance this game is going to get moved. I was like, clearly this game is going to get moved. We know it's going to happen. The game is taking place in Glendale, Arizona, in a stadium that we are familiar with over there. I believe State Farm Arena, I believe it's called, the home of the Cardinals. The Rams, 2.5-point dogs in this game as they home team. It was about 1.5. Then, of course, the line moved to about 2.5 when they're playing in Arizona. The only upset of the weekend, I'm taking the Rams in this one. I think it's a very
Ooh.
coin flip game. I could see the Vikings winning, but I think the Rams, in a neutral kind of site here game, maybe travel plans were mixed up, so maybe not as many Minnesota fans going to be able to get to this game. Obviously, not as many LA fans going to be able to get to this game. Going to be a very mixed, weird crowd going on, and I think the Rams are used to playing in that environment. Hell, they go into silent counts in their own stadium. They're used to playing in this. I don't know if the offense gets back on track per se, but this game feels very 27-24. I think it's going to play out very similar to the way that Thursday night game did, maybe a little bit better defense from both sides. And I think the Rams win this game, get the upset, get back on track in winning in the playoffs. Give me Los Angeles.
Interesting. I feel like this is the toughest one to call out of
It
the
is.
6 games,
Yeah.
and I thought with you typically going against your team, you surprised me there. I thought you were going to go against them, especially with their offensive struggles down the stretch that they were winning, but winning ugly. I mean, where has Cooper Kupp been these last
Yeah.
few games?
Yeah.
Certainly affected a lot of fantasy teams down the stretch,
Oh yeah.
mine included. But with that being said, like I said, it's a tough call. I'm taking the Vikings. I think they're gonna
That's fair.
edge him out here. I think it's a field goal game, but I just feel like Minnesota too impressive over the course of the season. The 14-3 record. I know it didn't end well, but I feel like they're going to be able to bounce back. Darnold's had too much of a storybook season. They got too many guys to cover on that team, and the Rams defense, as you know, particularly in the secondary, can be vulnerable. That's asking a lot going against
Oh yeah.
Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson at tight end. They got a lot they can throw at you. I might lean toward the Rams if they were at home, but the fact that it's a neutral site makes me go slight edge more to Minnesota. Close game, tough one to call, but I just feel like the Rams. I didn't see enough offensively down the stretch that could make me believe they could score points with a high-powered offense like the Vikings. So I think Minnesota squeaks it out in the end.
Yeah, it's fair. I think the two, to me, coin flip games of the weekend are these last two games that we picked. And that was our only disagreement of all our picks in the wild card weekend.
Yeah.
I think some people are so into, well, there's always an upset. So there has to be one. It's like, let's just think logically. I think a lot of these games are overmatched opponents. We know it's going to go the way. This one for sure is a clear coin flip game. I could see it going either way. There's arguments for both sides. But man, I'm super excited to get into the playoffs, to see my team play, to see all of this stuff. There is nothing better than football, and especially football at this time of the year in January. And then, of course, in February, the high stakes, the drama, the historical precedents. I love all that stuff. I live for it, and I'm sure you do as well. Bri, we're done here. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes our wildcard picks, our Week 18 kind of coverage here, some head coaching stuff going on. Jump down in the comments below. Let us know what you thought. Give us your playoff picks. Maybe talk about how your team's season wrapped up. Maybe you're just looking forward to the NFL draft and free agency. Let us know all that stuff down below. And Brian, before we get out of here, any final thoughts going into the playoff, the first weekend of the playoffs?
Of course, we're getting underway here as of this recording in a little over an hour. But just a final note on the Jets, because their coaching search is a topic of conversation, and they seem to have cast a very wide net
Mm,
as far as their interview process. It seems like there's about 15 different
yeah,
candidates. A couple of they've kind of gone way off the radar, like the Maryland football coach
yeah.
Mike Locksley, and some more conventional choices like Mike Vrabel, though it seems like he's going to go to New England. Brian Flores, who I'm very intrigued by. I think that could potentially be a very good fit. But obviously, it'll be very interesting to see where they go. I think Jeff Ulbrich is actually getting an interview, which I don't even know why he is. The only reason would be that he was the interim, but
Yeah,
I don't think he has less than a 0.1% chance of getting the job.
yeah.
But nonetheless, we'll see where they go, but it's going to be an interesting search for
Yeah,
sure.
the completed interviews so far for the New York Jets are Spagnolo, Vrabel,
Yeah,
Rex Ryan, Matt Nagy,
yeah,
and
forget that.
yeah, and Mike Locksley, and Aaron Glenn as well. So all of those are the completed interviews so far. Request wise, it's Joe Brady, Brian Flores, Vance Joseph. Who else we got here? Bobby Slowick, Arthur Smith. Also completed Ron Rivera. So that one is done as well.
Yeah.
So a wide net also on the GM search. All I'm saying, Bry, is I know you're gonna hate it. Don't be surprised Rex Ryan gets this job. I think it would be a terrible hire, but that is the Jets. Do not be shocked if he ends up getting this job.
So no thank you for me. No thank you.
Yeah, would you quit the season if he gets hired?
I wouldn't quit the season. I just would feel like the circus is still in town and never left.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be going off on that on the next podcast. But guys, we'll be back once again. Maybe there'll be some head coaching hires that we could talk about in the next episode. And please, as I said, give your thoughts down below. And yeah, we're going to really appreciate it. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends if you'd be so kind. Until next episode of First and 10, where we covered the divisional round. Thank you for watching.